Aquarius. If this found you, pause for a moment. You're not here by accident, and you're not late to love. Deep down, you've been asking yourself something quietly. Am I asking for too much, or have I been accepting far too little? You're someone who doesn't want a half love. Not a connection that looks good on the surface, but feels empty underneath. And tonight, this message is simple. A rare kind of love is moving toward you. But it only finds you when you stop settling. If you're open to receiving this chapter, comment below, I choose depth over settling. Because what comes next is not a small story. It's the beginning of something you've never experienced before. If this message has reached you now, it's because something inside you has been quietly shifting. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for you to notice. There's been a question sitting with you lately, not one you asked out loud, but one you felt in your chest, usually late at night, when everything finally goes quiet. You've wondered if wanting depth makes you difficult, if needing honesty makes you unrealistic, if expecting emotional presence means you're asking for too much. And I want you to hear this clearly. You're not asking for too much. You're just no longer willing to live on fragments. Aquarius energy doesn't rush. It waits until awareness catches up with desire. Until the mind and the heart finally agree. You've always sensed when something was incomplete, even if you stayed, even if you tried to make it work. There was a subtle disconnect you couldn't ignore. Conversations that stayed on the surface. Affection without understanding. Closeness without true intimacy. And you noticed how tired that made you feel. Not dramatic tired, but a quiet exhaustion. The kind that comes from giving presence where presence isn't fully returned. That's not weakness. That's clarity forming. There's a reason your standards have sharpened recently. Why certain connections no longer hold your attention. Why you feel less willing to explain yourself or justify what you need. It's not because you've become cold. It's because you've become honest. You've reached a point where chemistry alone isn't enough. Potential isn't enough. Good intentions aren't enough. You want alignment. Mutual curiosity. A connection that doesn't require you to shrink, translate yourself, or pretend not to notice what feels off. And here's the quiet truth. When that inner shift happens, life begins responding differently, not immediately. Not in obvious ways, but through who stays, who fades, who suddenly feels incompatible, and who begins to resonate without effort. You might feel a sense of emptiness right now. A pause. A space where something used to be. That space isn't a loss. It's an opening. Because you can't receive what matches you while holding on to what only half meets you. You don't need to force anything. You don't need to search harder. You don't need to lower yourself to be chosen. What's meant to find you responds to who you are when you stop settling. So take a breath here. Let this moment land. You haven't missed your chance. You haven't been forgotten. You haven't fallen behind. You've simply reached the point where your life is ready to meet you at your depth. And as you stay with this awareness, as you let yourself remain open but discerning, something begins to move quietly in the background. Not rushed, not loud, but intentional. And you'll feel it before you understand it. A subtle knowing. A sense of recognition. A shift that doesn't need explanation. Just stay here for a moment longer. Because what unfolds from this awareness changes the way you experience connection from here on out. You've probably noticed something about yourself that others don't always understand. You don't move toward love because you feel empty. You move toward it because you feel curious. Because your mind wants to meet another mind. Because your soul wants room to breathe. You've never been interested in being rescued. Or rescuing anyone else. What you've been looking for, even if you didn't have the words for it yet, is a connection where no one has to disappear to keep the peace. And that's rare. You may have grown up watching relationships that looked fine from the outside. Two people sharing space, sharing routines, sharing a life. But when you looked closer, something was missing. Not affection, not commitment, but understanding. You saw how often people stayed together while slowly losing the ability to speak honestly. How silence replaced truth. How love became careful instead of alive. And something inside you quietly decided that if love was going to happen for you, it would have to be different. That decision didn't come from arrogance. It came from awareness. You weren't trying to be special. You were trying to be real. So instead of fitting yourself into someone else's expectations, you began shaping a vision that felt true to you. A connection where conversation matters. Where curiosity doesn't fade. Where independence is respected, not feared. Where two people can disagree without withdrawing. Can speak openly without punishment. Can grow without leaving each other behind. That kind of connection doesn't form quickly. And it doesn't appear often. Because it requires two people who have done enough inner work to stop projecting their wounds onto each other. It requires emotional maturity, self-responsibility, and the courage to be seen without armor. That's why you may have felt out of sync at times. like you were tuned to a frequency others couldn't hear yet. You weren't wrong. You were early. And while that path can feel lonely, it also protects something important: your integrity, your depth, your ability to love without losing yourself. You might have questioned whether holding out was worth it, whether your standards were unrealistic, whether compromise meant giving up parts of yourself just to feel chosen. But listen to this part carefully. What feels rare is not your desire for depth. What's rare is your willingness to wait for it. Most people settle not because they want to, but because they're afraid of the quiet. You learned how to sit with it, how to listen to it, how to let it shape you rather than harden you. And now, that same quiet is becoming magnetic. Because the moment you stop searching for validation, you become visible to something different, something intentional, something awake. Not a connection that fills a void, but one that meets you where you stand. You don't have to explain yourself there. You don't have to prove your worth. You don't have to dim your insight. You'll recognize it not by intensity, but by ease. By how natural it feels to be fully yourself. By how little effort it takes to stay open. By how seen you feel without needing to perform. Just stay present with that feeling for a moment. Let it settle. Because when you understand why this kind of connection is rare, you also understand why it's worth waiting for. There have been moments when you quietly wondered if something was wrong with your timing. You watch people around you fall into relationships quickly, easily, almost effortlessly. They met someone, they committed, they moved forward, and there you were. Still observing, still waiting, still feeling like life was unfolding just a little slower for you. Not painfully slow, just different. There were nights when that difference felt heavy. When you asked yourself why love seemed to arrive for others without resistance, while you remained in this in-between space. But here's what you may not have realized at the time. You weren't standing still. You were calibrating. Aquarius doesn't rush into connection for the sake of movement. You move when it feels aligned, when your inner world and your outer choices finally match. What looks like waiting from the outside is often deep internal work on the inside. You were learning discernment, learning how to tell the difference between attraction and compatibility, between attention and presence, between potential and reality. That kind of learning takes time. And while others were collecting experiences, you were refining awareness. You noticed patterns early. You sensed emotional imbalance quickly. You felt when something was built on longing instead of mutual understanding. So you stepped back, not because you were afraid of love, but because you respected it. That choice may have felt isolating at times. It may have made you question your pace, your desirability, your path. But slowing down was never a failure for you. It was a form of protection. You were protecting your energy, your values, your capacity to love deeply without becoming depleted. And here's the part most people never see. By not rushing, you taught yourself how to be alone without feeling abandoned. How to enjoy your own presence. How to build a life that didn't depend on someone else completing it. That's not delay. That's foundation. Love that lasts doesn't begin with urgency. It begins with clarity. It begins when you stop measuring your life against someone else's timeline and start listening to your own internal rhythm. The truth is, you didn't arrive late to love. You arrived prepared. Prepared to recognize emotional maturity when it appears. Prepared to notice safety instead of chasing intensity. Prepared to choose someone who can meet you in conversation, in silence, and in growth. You may still feel that quiet space around you now. That pause before something forms. But that pause isn't empty. It's full of alignment settling into place. Full of self-respect solidifying. Full of you becoming unmistakable to the kind of connection that can actually hold you. So if part of you still wonders whether the waiting meant you missed something important, let that question soften. Nothing passed you by. You were never behind. You were just walking a path that doesn't reward speed, but depth. And as you stay with that understanding, as you let go of comparing your pace to anyone else's, you begin to feel something else take shape. A quiet confidence. A grounded readiness. A sense that when love does arrive, it won't ask you to hurry. It will meet you exactly where you are. At some point, you began noticing the quiet sentences you say to yourself. Not out loud. Just under the surface. Almost automatic. They show up when something starts to feel close. When a connection deepens. When someone sees you a little too clearly. You might recognize them. A soft thought that says no one will ever love you the way you love. A familiar feeling that tells you care too much, feel too deeply, expect too honestly. And sometimes a heavier voice that wonders if long-lasting love was simply not designed for you. Those thoughts did not appear out of nowhere. They were shaped by repetition, by experiences that ended without explanation, by connections where your depth was met with distance, by moments where you offered sincerity and received confusion in return. So you adapted. You learned to brace yourself, to lower expectations quietly, To tell yourself stories that made disappointment feel safer. Not because you were pessimistic, but because you were protecting your heart in the only way you knew how at the time. But Aquarius, you were never meant to build your future on conclusions drawn from unfinished experiences. Beliefs are not truths, they are echoes. And echoes fade when new awareness enters the room. Something has already been shifting inside you. You may have felt it as restlessness, or fatigue, or a subtle resistance to repeating old patterns. That is not fear. That is clarity beginning to speak. You are realizing that sensitivity is not a flaw. It is perception. It is your ability to notice nuance, to feel undercurrents, to love with presence instead of performance. And loving deeply does not mean loving unconditionally without discernment. It means loving consciously, with boundaries, with self-respect, with choice. When you begin changing the way you speak to yourself, something profound happens. You stop narrating your life through past disappointment. You stop predicting the future using outdated stories. You stop filtering new connections through old wounds. Instead, you begin listening. You notice how different it feels to say, I am capable of being met. To say my depth is not a burden. To say, I am learning what alignment feels like. Those words do not force anything. They simply open space. And what enters that space is not chaos, it is refinement. You become more selective, more grounded, less willing to negotiate your truth. Not because you are rigid, but because you finally trust yourself enough to honor what you feel. There is relief in that. A quiet relief. The kind that softens your shoulders, slows your breathing, lets your nervous system exhale. You are no longer trying to convince yourself that less is enough. You are allowing yourself to believe that being fully seen is not a fantasy. And as that belief loosens its grip, as the old narratives lose their authority, something else becomes possible. You start to recognize yourself before someone else ever has to. You begin to meet life with a steadier presence, with a clearer signal, with a heart that is open but no longer unguarded. Just sit with that for a moment. Notice how different it feels to imagine love not as something to endure, but as something that can meet you gently. That shift, subtle as it may seem, changes everything that responds to you from here. There is something important you need to hear right now, and I want you to hear it without doubt. You are not imagining this shift. That quiet sense that something you have been asking for is beginning to respond. Not loudly, not all at once, but gently, consistently. You have been calling in a different kind of connection. Not with desperation, not with force, but with honesty. A connection where power is shared, where truth does not feel dangerous, where expressing emotion does not come with a cost, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, life has been adjusting to that signal. You may have noticed it first in yourself. The way your tolerance changed. The way certain conversations no longer held your attention. The way your body responded when something felt misaligned. You didn't become colder. You became clearer. You stopped entertaining energy that required you to explain your worth. You stopped leaning toward people who only met you halfway. You stopped mistaking intensity for intimacy. And without realizing it, you changed the invitation you were sending out. The universe does not respond to words alone. It responds to consistency, to who you choose when no one is watching, to what you walk away from without needing closure, to how you speak to yourself in moments of doubt. That is where the response begins. You may not see a person yet. You may not have a name or a face, but you can feel the difference in the air. Interactions feel more intentional. Conversations feel less draining. Your nervous system feels safer around the idea of closeness. That is not coincidence. That is resonance forming. You have been learning to choose yourself without closing your heart, to remain open without abandoning your standards, to trust your intuition without needing proof. And because of that, what approaches you now moves differently. It does not rush you. It does not confuse you. It does not require you to perform or impress. It meets you in presence, in curiosity, in respect. You are no longer chasing connection. You are recognizing it. There is relief in that, a grounded calm, a sense that you do not need to convince life to give you more. You simply need to remain aligned with what you know is true for you. And as you continue choosing from that place, something subtle but powerful happens. You become easier to find, not for everyone, but for the right kind of energy, the kind that listens when you speak, the kind that does not flinch at your depth, the kind that sees your independence as an invitation, not a threat. You do not need to search harder. You do not need to try differently. You do not need to explain yourself better. Just stay where you are, present, clear, open. Notice how your chest feels when you imagine being met without resistance. Notice the calm that replaces anticipation. Notice how your breath slows when you stop wondering if it will happen. It already is, in ways that cannot be rushed, in ways that respect your timing. And as you remain here, grounded in this awareness, You may begin to sense how natural it feels to let connection come toward you instead of reaching for it. That feeling quiet and steady is not the end of the story. It is the moment when everything starts responding more clearly to who you have become. What you may notice first is how different this feels. Not intense, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just easy. There is a softness to it, a natural rhythm, like stepping into a room and realizing you can finally breathe. This kind of love does not arrive carrying weight. It does not demand proof. It does not test your endurance. It simply settles in. You might catch yourself smiling for no clear reason, laughing without guarding the sound, feeling lighter in your body without trying to understand why, and for a moment, you may even question it. Is this real? Is it too calm? Is something missing? But nothing is missing. What feels unfamiliar is peace. You have grown so used to effort to emotional labor to decoding mixed signals that ease can feel almost suspicious. Yet this is how alignment often shows itself, not through fireworks, but through comfort, through warmth, through a quiet sense of recognition. You may notice how conversation flows without strategy, how silence does not feel awkward, how being yourself does not require adjustment. There is laughter, but it is not a distraction. It is connection. There is familiarity, but not boredom. More like a sense of remembering something you forgot you were allowed to have. You realize that love does not need to hurt to feel meaningful. It does not need chaos to feel alive. It can be gentle and still be profound. And that realization alone can bring a kind of joy that feels almost emotional. Because part of you has been bracing for impact for so long, waiting for the other shoe to drop, preparing for disappointment even in moments of happiness. This time feels different, not because you are being careless, but because your nervous system feels safe enough to stay open. You are not performing joy, you are experiencing it. And for someone like you, that matters. Aquarius energy recognizes truth through authenticity. When something is right, it does not pull you out of yourself. If out of yourself, it brings you closer in. You remain curious, grounded. Joy becomes a signal, not an escape. It tells you that you are not abandoning your values, not compromising your depth, not settling for surface-level connection. You are simply allowing yourself to enjoy what aligns. You may find yourself thinking, I forgot love could feel like this, and that thought carries relief, not regret. Because everything before this taught you discernment. It taught you what effort without reciprocity feels like, what chemistry without safety feels like, what presence without consistency costs. Now, joy arrives without asking you to pay that price. It does not rush you forward. It does not pull you backward. It walks beside you. And as you stay with this feeling, as you let joy exist without questioning it away, you may notice how it begins to soften other areas of your life. Your creativity opens. Your energy steadies. Your sense of possibility expands. Joy becomes permission. Permission to trust your experience. Permission to believe that love can be kind. Permission to stop equating depth with difficulty. Just let yourself stay here for a moment. In the warmth, in the ease, in the quiet happiness that does not ask for justification. Because when joy shows up naturally, it is often guiding you toward something that knows how to grow with you without ever needing to hurt you first. There is a quiet moment that often appears in spaces like this. Right after joy has settled in, right after ease begins to feel possible, it is the moment where choice becomes important. Because while you are allowing yourself to breathe again, while you are learning to enjoy connection without tension, there can still be familiar figures hovering nearby. People who feel safe enough, comfortable enough, present enough to fill the silence. They are not unkind, they are not harmful. They simply do not reach you where it matters most. And that is where the pause begins. Not dramatic, not obvious, just a subtle internal question that asks, is this enough for me? Loneliness can be persuasive. It speaks softly. It tells you that closeness is better than emptiness. That companionship is better than waiting. But you have learned something important about yourself. You do not fear being alone. You fear being unseen. You fear slowly dimming your insight, lowering your curiosity, editing your truth to maintain proximity. That kind of closeness costs you more than solitude ever could. There may be moments when staying feels easier, when the thought of starting over feels heavy, when the idea of waiting just a little longer feels exhausting. And yet, something inside you knows the difference between rest and settling. Settling has a feeling to it, a tightening in the chest, a quiet resignation, a sense of telling yourself a story you no longer believe. You have outgrown that feeling, not because you are demanding, but because you are honest. You are honest about what nourishes you, about what drains you, about what kind of presence allows you to expand rather than contract. You are no longer willing to trade depth for convenience, or clarity for company, or truth for temporary comfort, and that does not make you difficult, it makes you precise. There is a strength in knowing when something cannot follow you forward. A calm strength, one that does not need justification or explanation. You are allowed to leave space open, even when it feels uncomfortable, especially when it feels uncomfortable, because that space is not empty. It is active. It is where alignment takes shape, where the right energy recognizes your availability, where what can truly meet you begins to move closer. Not everyone you meet is meant to walk beside you for long. Some are meant to reflect where you have been. Others simply show you what you no longer need. That does not diminish their value. It honors your direction. You do not owe anyone access to your future. You do not owe anyone a chapter they cannot read with care. And as you hold that boundary gently, without anger, without fear, without apology, you create a very clear signal. You tell life, I am available for what matches me. That signal does not rush what is coming. It protects it. So if you feel the temptation to settle in moments of uncertainty, just pause. Breathe. Listen to your body. Notice what feels expansive. Notice what feels heavy. You already know the difference. And as you continue honoring that knowing, as you allow yourself to remain open without filling the space prematurely, something steadier begins to form within you. A grounded patience. A quiet confidence. A sense that what approaches you next will not require you to compromise who you have become. Stay with that feeling. Because the way you hold this space now shapes everything that is able to enter it. There is a feeling you may be noticing now. A quiet sense of readiness. Not urgency, not impatience. Just a calm awareness that something is aligning. You are standing at a point where you no longer question your worth. You no longer negotiate your values internally. You no longer wonder if wanting more makes you unreasonable. It doesn't. It makes you honest. What you are opening yourself to now is not something common. Not something easily replaced. Not something that appears twice in the same way. This kind of connection carries a certain weight, not heaviness, responsibility. The responsibility to show up as you are, to remain present, to care without possession, to protect what is rare without trying to control it. You understand this instinctively. You know that what matters most cannot be rushed and cannot be forced. It grows when there is patience, when attention is consistent, when two people choose presence again and again even on ordinary days. That kind of bond does not survive compromise of self. It requires integrity. And you have learned that integrity is quiet. It does not announce itself. It simply guides your choices. You are no longer interested in proving anything. You are interested in preserving what feels true. That is why you pause before committing now. Why you listen more carefully. Why you notice how something treats your nervous system before you let it into your life. This is not fear. It is discernment. You were never meant to live a love that feels average. A love that dulls your curiosity. A love that asks you to minimize your inner world. You were built for something conscious, something reciprocal, something that allows both people to remain whole. And because you know that now you carry yourself differently, there is less tension in your seeking, less urgency in your waiting, more trust in your timing. You are no longer chasing the future. You are preparing space for it. And that space matters, because what arrives next needs room to breathe, room to unfold naturally, room to meet you without distortion. You do not need to watch the door. You do not need to anticipate the moment. All you need to do is continue honoring yourself in the small choices, the quiet boundaries, the moments where you choose alignment over convenience. That is how this path stays clear. There may still be uncertainty at times. Moments when the unknown feels close. When you wonder how it will all come together. Let those moments pass gently. You are not meant to have every answer now. You are meant to stay present with what feels right. And as you do, as you keep your values intact, as you remain open, without lowering your standards, life responds in ways that feel surprisingly precise. You begin to notice that what approaches you does not ask you to settle. It meets you with intention, with curiosity, with respect. And when that happens, you will recognize it not because it overwhelms you, but because it feels steady, like something that knows how to stay. So rest here for a moment. In this knowing, in this calm certainty, you are not waiting for your life to begin. You are already living in alignment with it, and that more than anything is what allows what is meant for you to finally find you exactly as you are. Before you go anywhere, I want you to notice something, right now. Notice how your body feels. Not your thoughts, your body. That quiet steadiness, that sense of being more grounded than when you first pressed play. That's not coincidence. That's what happens when you finally hear a truth you've been carrying alone for a long time. Aquarius, you didn't come here looking for answers. You came here to remember yourself. And if this message stayed with you until now, it's because something in you recognized itself in every pause, every breath, every moment of clarity. You're not broken, you're not behind. And you were never meant to fit into a love that required you to shrink. What you are walking toward is not louder love, not flashier love, not complicated love. It's conscious love, the kind that doesn't chase, the kind that stays. And here's the part most people never realize. The rare love you're calling in doesn't arrive when you finally feel ready. It arrives when you stop abandoning yourself while waiting for it. That's the shift you just made. Quietly, without announcement, without needing anyone's permission. So if this message touched something real inside you, leave a comment below, just one sentence. Something simple. Something honest. I choose depth. I choose alignment. I trust my timing. Because when you say it out loud, you're not just speaking to this space. You're signaling to others who are walking the same path as you. And if you're not already part of this circle, subscribe. Not for predictions, not for noise, but for reminders like this, the kind that meet you late at night when you need them most. This isn't the end of the conversation. It's the moment you realize you're not walking this journey alone. Another message is already forming. Another layer of understanding is on its way. So stay close, stay open, and most of all, stay loyal to what you know is true inside you. Because the more you trust yourself, the clearer the path becomes. And the love that finds you next will know exactly why it waited until now.